Why don't you see your nearby Fetters dealer for the cool, quiet one? Television 9. Green Acres and Hee Haw will not be seen tonight at their regular time periods to enable us to bring you the following special programs.
The 1971 Spring Peace Offensive filled a few days more than 3 weeks. It began with the arrival of a few anti-war veterans the weekend of April 17th. It began with no great expectations of success or impact, but it moved, sometimes in a furious rush of events. Incredibly, the Supreme Court became involved in the camping permits. The Capitol became a stage for guerrilla theater. Labor leaders and suburban mothers marched behind the leadership of hardcore anti-war activists. And the final stages brought confrontation and vandalism in the name of peace. Street sweep arrests of thousands of people in the name of order. Every part of Washington seemed to be touched by some aspect of the intense 3 weeks. Clearly the city had seen something more than just another peace demonstration orchestrated by professional demonstrators. The attitudes and tactics of the protest movement have shifted, and the government reaction is changing also. The impact on the peace movement and on the Nixon administration's war policy is still being measured.
I mean, it was an inconvenience to some individuals, but the government didn't cease to function, and none of the agencies closed down and so on, so it didn't really achieve their purpose. At the same time, I don't think it was sufficiently serious to cause a reaction against the anti-war movement.
So I think they've gone too far, and what they've really done, in effect, instead of being positive, they've been negative. They've been revulsive to many people and revolting to many people. I think as a result, it has been counterproductive.
This is a WTOP News special report. Protest 71, Changing Faces of Dissent. Here now are correspondents Gordon Peterson and Max Robinson.
Good evening. This special report is an effort to put the Spring Peace Offensive in perspective. With me and Gordon, our correspondents CAROLYN Lewis and Ford Rowan. We hope the examination of Protest 71, that historic 3-week period, will document the changing character of the anti-war movement and government reaction. An anti-war protest always raises the question of the morality of war, but other important questions have also been raised. How does the government determine the thin line between peaceful dissent and unlawful activity? And what is the difference between persuasion and coercion? What police reaction is justified when civil disobedience threatens order, when that police action endangers civil liberties? Well, clearly, the weeks of protests raise questions at least equal in importance to the war issue itself. Gordon?
In mid-March, it became clear that we would see another peace offensive here. But there was skepticism in and out of the peace movement that it could be effective. While more than 70% of the American people now want to see the war ended, a majority approve the president's program for winding the war down. Casualty rates are only 1/4 the rate of 1969, and the withdrawal rate of American troops is proceeding rapidly. The National Peace Action Coalition and other loosely organized groups went ahead with plans for a large rally on April 24th, promising that at least 100,000 people would come. But Protest 71 started with less than 1,000 people, not on April 24th, but a week early, when the Vietnam Veterans Against the War arrived. Of the 3 million men who served in Vietnam, they constituted less than 1/10% of the Vietnam vets, as Senate Minority Leader Hugh Scott was quick to point out. Critics dismissed them as hardly representative of the American veterans. Yet, in their 1 week here, they attracted the attention of the President, the Congress, and the Supreme Court, as well as the nation. The veterans trooped in from all over the country. They talked of Vietnam and the places they'd fought with the same ease that you or I might have in describing downtown Washington, or Chevy Chase, or Anacostia. Khe Sanh? Yes. And were you ever in Da Nang? No, I was in the Mekong Delta, the DMZ, Pleiku, Saigon. Back and forth it went, remembering friends from the Nam, many alive, some dead now. While some said they'd been against the war before they got to it, most said they learned to hate it fighting it.
3 divisions, the 82nd, the 101st, and the 1st Cav, and like he was in the 101st and I was in the 82nd, and we both took part in the same operation. So, you know, we both essentially went through the same together, and so like the Winter Soldier investigation that was held in Detroit a few months ago, that brought us together, and like this is going to bring us together also, and Mr. Nixon splitting for 17 days is not going to change it.
The GIs came to petition the Congress, but discovered their adversary was the executive branch. They wanted to camp on the mall, but the veterans could not get a permit.
I think this is pretty obviously a last-minute political hassle. They've had our permit request for 3 weeks, over 3 weeks now, and they waited until one working day before this thing was to kick off to issue an injunction against the camping permit. As I say, we'll go through all legal means possible to get a reversal. We didn't come down here to break the law.
After the veterans got an appeals court to approve camping without tents or fires, the Justice Department appealed to the Supreme Court to uphold the injunction against camping. The veterans stayed on the mall while the court considered the issue. They visited Arlington National Cemetery, but the cemetery that honors Vietnam's dead refused to admit its survivors. The reason, a rule prohibiting placards and demonstrators. The next day they returned, and a discussion at the gate of Arlington ironed out that problem.
Were they trying to get into this gate with the placards? You saw placards and assumed we were going to bring them in. That is correct. And you did not even bother to ask?
No, I didn't.
So that is the reason why we are in Washington today, because everyone assumes things without ever taking the time to ask, see?
Then I stand corrected.
And we will be allowed then to lay our wreath.
Yes, you will.
2 wreaths were laid, one for 45,000 American war dead, the other for Vietnamese who have died. But the war was a secondary issue. The legal battle had gone all the way to Chief Justice Warren Burger. He ruled the original government injunction against camping was valid. The vets would have to go while the Justice Department debated his policy. The vets made theirs.
The vote is to stay awake in the park 400 and to sleep 480. By a majority account then of those here present and voting, we stay and we sleep.
An eviction never came. The Justice Department did not explain, but one police lieutenant put it this way: we're not going in there at 1 in the morning and pick up some wounded veteran and throw him into the street. The entire Supreme Court had to consider the Chief Justice's decision. So the veterans went ahead with their peace campaign. Carolyn Lewis was on Capitol Hill.
To a Congress already troubled by its impotence to make and unmake wars, the spectacle of protesting Vietnam veterans was unsettling. The vivid, gruesome guerrilla theater dramatically reminded senators and representatives of what congressional decision and indecision had created in Vietnam.
Get his arm. What are you doing?
There were early administration efforts to discredit the demonstrators. Some Republicans charged that they were not all bona fide vets, that they represented only a tiny handful of the men who have returned from Vietnam.
Now, we're not doing this kind of stuff to show that we're great heroes or that we're proud of what we've done. We're doing it because the people that you're reporting to have got to see what we do over there, why we're saying that we can't have it anymore.
But the Senate Foreign Relations Committee took them seriously. By a coincidence of timing, the committee was holding hearings on assorted bills to curb the president's war-making powers. Chairman Fulbright invited a veterans spokesman to testify. The result was high drama in the committee room and one of the most powerful anti-war speeches that senators could recall.
How do you ask a man to be the last man to die in Vietnam? How do you ask a man to be the last man to die for a mistake? We're here to ask where are McNamara, Barstow, Bundy, Gilpatrick, and so many others? Where are they now that we, the men whom they sent off to war, have returned? These are commanders who have deserted their troops, and there is no more serious crime in the law of war. The Army says they never leave their wounded. The Marines say they never leave even their dead. These men have left all the casualties and retreated behind a pious shield of public rectitude. They've left the real stuff of their reputations, bleaching behind them in the sun in this country. And finally, this administration has done us the ultimate dishonor. They have attempted to disown us and the sacrifices we made for this country. In their blindness and fear, they have tried to deny that we are veterans or that we served in Nam. We do not need their testimony. Our own scars and stumps of limbs are witness enough for others, and for we wish that it would wipe away our own memories of that service, as easily as this administration has wiped their memories of us. But all that they have done, and all that they can do by this denial, is to make more clear than ever our own determination to undertake one last mission, to search out and destroy the last vestige of this barbaric war, to pacify our own hearts, to conquer the hate and fear that have driven this country these last 10 years and more. And so when 30 years from now our brothers go down the street without a leg, without an arm or a face, and small boys ask why, we will be able to say Vietnam, and not mean a desert, not a filthy, obscene memory, but mean instead the place where America finally turned, and where soldiers like us helped it in the turning. Thank you.
Mr. Kerry, move your microphone a little bit, will you?
Which way, sir?
That way. You have a Silver Star, have you not?
Yes, I do.
And you have a Purple Heart?
Yes, I do.
How many clusters on it?
2 clusters.
You've been wounded 3 times?
Yes, sir.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Sit down.